Hey Tommy, how are you?
Good. How you doing, Deanna? It's good to see you.
I'm okay. Thanks for joining me.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. I haven't seen you in a really long time. Uh, oh, we won't discuss how long that's been in person, but
Yes.
we've been friends a long time. It's nice to see
Many,
you,
many
man.
years. Nice to see you
Many
too.
years. I don't know where all that time went.
I don't know, man. It's escaping quickly.
It's escaping quickly. Well, it's nice to see you, and I got to say hi to Daria, and you guys have a son. You're happily living in Portland, Oregon, uh,
Yep.
doing good at your job. I want all the details, but I want you to start at the beginning. Tell me about your family, where they were from.
Okay. So, I'm originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico, born and raised there. Uh, my both my parents are from the South. My father's from Georgia. My mother's from Louisiana. Uh, my father was a lot older when he had me. He was born in 1927. He fought in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. He joined the Air Force, but also called the Army Air Corps. And then, he traveled all around the world and stuff like that. His final duty station was Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And 2 years later, after he retired, I was born. And my mother is from Louisiana. Uh, she's total Creole. Her maiden last name is Fontenot. So we still have a lot of family in Louisiana.
Was your mom just a strong woman?
My mother didn't play around. Little quick story. So when we were kids, there was these kids that lived around the corner from us. They lived by this market called the Garfield Market in Albuquerque, and they were the Vanderhay kids. They were these white kids, and they were just trashy people. They just were. Let's just be honest. And so one day, my friend Eli and I were sitting in my front lawn. We were hanging out. We'd already had an issue with the Vandals earlier in that day, but nothing big came out of it. But when we were sitting in my front lawn, I saw my mom come home, and my mom was hot. I could tell she was hot. So I looked at her in the car. So she walks inside the house, puts her purse down, walks out the house. She starts walking around the corner. So me and I decided to follow her. I could tell her something was wrong. And so we followed her, and she walks right up to the Vanderheist house, did knock on the door, opened the door, grabbed the mother, and said, "Take care of your fucking children, or I will, bitch." And she walked out. And so that was it. That's kind of my mom. She did not play. She was a wonderful woman, loving, kind, but once she crossed that threshold, it was a different beast altogether. So.
Wow. Did you have any idea at that point how tough your mom was?
Oh, well, yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
my mom was a tall lady. My dad was only like 5'6", 5'7". My mom was like 5'11". And my mom was just
Really?
tough. Yeah. My mom was no joke. My mom ran the house. She you'd not play with her at all. At all.
That's
At all.
great. And your dad born in 1927. That's
Yep.
awesome.
Yeah.
That those are the stories that inspired me for this podcast is our parents and our grandparents and if you ever ask those older people stories about their life, it's like you just can't even imagine the stuff that they'll tell you.
Yeah, yeah. It's just crazy. I mean, it's you didn't take till I was older to realize like, damn, my dad was born before the 30s. I'm just like, because my dad is probably old enough to be most of my friends' parents. I mean, both
Sure,
my friends' grandparents, actually, I
sure.
should say. So,
When we were in high school, I used to take care of my grandma. She was born in 1920. She was my best friend. She lived
yeah,
right near Van Buren and Highland, and I just love people of that generation. They're very wise.
yeah, they're very wise. They're different though, but a different kind of mentality. I think it was kind of rough for my dad to, uh, it's because my mom had passed away when I was young, so it's just me and my dad from the time I was 12 onwards. My dad had never really raised any of his kids. He'd been married previously, had other kids, but he was always in the military. So it was always the wives who took care of everything. And all of a sudden, he's stuck with a 12-year-old boy. So,
Wow. 12 years old too. You and your mom were really close too, weren't you?
yeah, she was my rock. She was everything to me, and it was, I mean, obviously, you lose a parent, it changes your life, but it changed me in more ways than I ever could imagine. 'Cause
Sure,
I don't think I dealt well with the grief. I don't think my father
sure.
dealt well with the grief. I know we did try to do a little bit of counseling, but neither one of us wanted to do it. So I think we went a few times and that was about it. But we definitely needed counseling and we should have stayed. But, it was the 80s and, uh, it was just And my dad was from down south, born in the 20s. Therapy, what the hell's therapy? That's just
Yeah.
crazy. You know what I'm saying? So I think the only reason
Yeah.
we went is because of me, because I was lashing out and, getting a little bit crazy and a little get besides myself. And I think someone suggested to him. So he went because he thought it would help me, but neither one of us wanted to be there. And when the therapist recommended that he have individual help me too, he was like, no, we're not doing that. So
So was it seventh or eighth grade when your mom passed away? And
it
then your
was, it
dad
was,
is,
it was eighth grade. It was eighth grade. I
wow.
think it was eighth grade. Yeah, it was seventh or eighth grade. I thought it was eighth grade because I remember she was still alive. Because I went to St. Pius for my freshman year of high school, and you had to take a test to get into St. Pius. And I remember getting the results, and I scored really really well on the results to get into St. Pius. And she was still alive then, but she was very very sick. So I remember she was still in her hospital bed. Um, when we got the results and found out that I was going to go to St. Pius, and I remember she was being extremely happy that I got in. So I actually got
Wow.
into the academy too. Actually, we got that
I,
letter too, but I was like, I'm not going to the academy. I'd spent the day there on a tour, and I was just like, yeah. I mean, I don't mind being
uh,
around wealthy people, but that was like, it was crazy. It was just way too much.
and every young person I ever knew that they sent to the academy came back hardcore. Like they did not mellow at the
Yeah,
academy. They rebelled excessively.
yeah, yeah. I
'Cause
mean, it was very strict. I mean, because the day I spent there, I mean, just the academic rigor was just so,
really,
just like, it was just like a little bit more than I was ready for. You know what I'm saying? And plus, I'd always felt all out of place all my life. I felt really out of place at academy, so I was like, yeah, we're not doing that.
no. Education, real important in your family, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it was. So my grandfather he was actually a Baptist preacher, but he's also an agricultural professor at Stanford. I don't in early 1900s. I don't remember when. It's just my grandfather died. I think when I was like 1 years old, so I didn't really get to meet him. It's just stories I heard. So he had gone to Grambling State. He got his degree in agriculture at Grambling State, which is a historic black college university. Same place my grandmother, his wife, my grandmother, she was educated there as well. They both got their bachelor's degrees, and I think my grandfather got his master's degree. I can't remember. Well, anyway, but then they moved to California and he started teaching agriculture at Stanford. And
That's
then,
a pretty big deal for a black man in the early 1900s.
oh, it's huge. It's huge. It's huge. My family was very much into education. My father would have gone. He wanted to go to med school was his initial plan, but my father, he got his first wife pregnant when he was 16, so that's why he joined the Army Air Corps because he had to take care of a family now. So.
Wow. To skip ahead a little bit, was it okay with him when you joined the Navy? Was he like,
Um,
Navy?
well, actually,
Or we'll
funny
get to
story.
that later.
Actually, it's kind of funny. It was actually, because of things I had done, my dad wasn't going to pay for college, so I had to join the military, and so I joined the Navy. He did ask me why I joined the Navy. He said the Air Force. I was, well, because you're in the Air Force. So, and also, well, but also the Navy was offering me more. I was gonna,
Sure.
basically, I got a degree
Sure.
in electronics when I was in the Navy. I got to fix air search radars, and so it was just a better choice for me at the time. I
Okay.
thought
Just
so.
checking, because sometimes that's like picking the opposite team. Parents don't take that all that well. A lot of
Yeah,
kids choose whatever branch of the service was common in their family.
yeah, I think it probably bothered him a little bit, but I think he was just happy that at least I went. You know what I'm
You were
saying?
s- you
So
were still alive. You were
yeah,
still
exactly,
alive. Okay, so
exactly.
just quickly, what middle school in
So what?
Albuquerque?
So I went to Emmanuel Lutheran. It was
Okay,
down
so
off of like Broadway and well, further than Broadway. It was like I can't remember. I think it was Arno and like Gold is where it was. It's like it's that. Do you remember the old Pop and Taco
yeah,
on
yeah,
Central? It was right down there
yeah.
because on Fridays we could, if we had money, they'd allow us to walk to Pop and Taco to get burritos and stuff. So that was always a treat for us when we went to Emmanuel Lutheran. But it was a great
So
school.
it's
I loved Emmanuel Lutheran. It was a good school.
a private school with a good education, but still off Central Avenue, Broadway.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember taking the bus. I mean, I remember taking the bus home because my parents couldn't always pick me up because they both worked. So, I remember, fifth through eighth grade, I took the bus in Central from my house up in UNM down Central to Emmanuel Lutheran. So, I mean, occasionally I
Wow,
got a ride, but not a lot. So, and you had to
that's
be
funny.
wary riding the bus in Albuquerque, as we all know.
Well, sure, I don't even know what we are being wary of, but I remember being wary.
Exactly, exactly, totally.
I used to walk from my grandmother's house Trauma and Central to Van Buren
Oh,
at
okay.
like Zuni in uh,
Oh, the war
Louisiana,
zone. Yeah, the war
the
zone.
war zone. And
Yeah.
at the time, I just thought it was normal. But I remember thinking, this doesn't seem like the safest neighborhood to be letting your kids walk around in.
Right, right.
Hmm.
It absolutely was not. The war
It
zone's crazy.
absolutely was not.
Yeah.
So your mom passes away, and your dad is left with a very strong man, a 12-year-old son. How'd that go for him?
Uh, you know, he did the best he could. No blame him. He was mourning as well. He was a workaholic. He worked a lot. Um, just because he pursued education pretty rigorously after he got out of the military, got his associate's and his bachelor's degree. He ended up managing like the grounds and the maintenance and the housekeeping staff at the military hospital on base, Sandia. So he did that for a long time. He was it was he worked a lot. He was mourning. It was just tough, and I was a crazy kid, and I was nothing like him. I mean, I was a kid, born in the '70s in Albuquerque, and he was born in the South in the '20s. I don't think he knew how to deal with me or handle me. Like I said, I wasn't dealing very well with my mother's life, so I jumped really, really hardcore into the counterculture. I'd already been, exposed to skateboarding and stuff, going to private schools. A lot of white kids skateboarded. So I got into that. Was never really good at it, but I liked to do it anyway. It was fun. And, I was more of a cleats on my feet athlete. Um,
Okay,
so, uh, yeah, it just, and then I just discovered punk rock, and the whole punk rock hardcore skinhead scene. And it felt comfortable to me because I'd never really felt like I belonged anywhere. But when you're with a bunch of misfits, we're none of us belong, but we were together, so we belonged together and just fit, and it worked. And I some of my greatest and longtime friends I met during that time period of my life, and I'm forever grateful for that.
really? That's great. Did you guys raise hell? I mean, I'm pretending like I didn't know, but
Oh
you did
God,
raise
yes,
hell.
we raised hell. We were just in. Oh my God, I mean, just our group of kids. So there's like in Albuquerque, I don't know if it was unique to us, but it's just like we had so many different kids from different schools, mostly Albuquerque and Highland together. You know what I'm saying? But some other schools thrown in there. But we all had this big group of punk rockers, skaters, and rockers, and we all hung out. We'd go to parties and I mean, back then in Albuquerque, there was a party every weekend somewhere. There was kegs out in the middle of the mesa by the airport. There was kegs up in the heights, out in the fields, and so there was always places to go. And then it's just that, we were young men and punk rockers. And so we thought we were so cool and tough. I mean, we fought so much in Albuquerque. We'd go to parties and fight constantly. And I remember being at parties because a lot of my friends got involved with guns and stuff. I remember being at parties and leaving after taking all my friends' guns away from them because they were drunk and I was afraid what they were going to do with them. I remember walking out of parties with like 5 guns in my flight jacket going, this could end really, really bad. The only black guy with a bunch of, Mexican and white skinheads and punk rockers. I had a jacket full of guns. I was like, God, what could possibly happen? So stupid. I mean, think about it now. I was just like, thank God something didn't happen.
Thank God that something didn't happen.
Yeah.
Hmm. I want to take a sidetrack. Give us a little skinhead history.
So
Tell us
I,
how
I'm,
it really is.
yeah. So,
For all those people that wouldn't listen to us those years
right.
ago.
So it gets under my skin because the media has portrayed that skinheads are Nazis and racist, and that's just not the case. Skinhead movement started with black kids in Jamaica and white kids in England together, listening to Northern soul music and ska music, precursor to today's reggae, dance hall music. And it was about unity, black and white kids from two different cultures, but under the British flag coming together in England and London and places like that, coming together with this new culture, with this new sound. And it was always based on unity. That's why like you hear two-tone, black and white. That's what it was all about. Black and white people grooving together, listen to music. We were all working class. It wasn't about being rich. It was about working class, that you worked for your own, you worked for your money. Everything you did, you put your heart into it. And then, and during the '70s, late '70s in England, because of racism and a lot of the Tories, which are like notorious, they're basically the right wing of England. Some of their parts of the Tories, the group started getting very nationalist and started getting very racist. There's an economic downturn in England, and there wasn't a lot of jobs, and so of course what happens, there's a lot of jobs. First thing you're going to do is you're going to start blaming the immigrants, and so racism became a big thing in England. And then there was a lot of disaffected youth. And so some of these people who worked in the conservative movement, whatever, they started getting these vulnerable kids who are already skinheads and feeding with all this racism, and that the reason that they were poor, that their family was struggling, or their dad was on the dole, or they were alcoholics, was because the immigrants came and took their jobs, which is not the case. That is not skinhead. You can't be a Nazi, you can't be racist and be a skinhead. That's not what it's about. That's not what it was started with, and it's just the media has corrupted it, and it came to America, and there all of a sudden there was like a lot of sharp is the skinheads against racial prejudice, which basically started in America. um and that was just a fight against the media, because they're saying skinheads are Nazis. You can't be a skinhead and be racist, but there was a lot of racist boneheads, what we call them, in America and in England, and it's just the core rule is that you absolutely cannot be considered a skinhead if you're racist. I mean, if you're
It
racist,
doesn't work.
you're just a bald head dude wearing the clothes that we like, basically. You're fronting. Because it's not that. It's always about unity and working class, and about black and white being together and grooving and making it work together. That was thing. That's what kind of called me to it, and that was the first time in my life I felt like I was welcome. Like a place for me where I wasn't, just Tommy Bottom, the black guy. It was just, I felt like I was part of the crew. It felt like home.
Well, and your crew was multicultural.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when I first transferred from St. Pius to Albuquerque High, I met Carlos Aguilar and Dominic Martinez, and they're skinheads and they're Hispanic. I mean, they're real Hispanic. I mean, there was no ifs, ands, or buts that they were Hispanic. And they were just the coolest dudes I had met at the time. And I just loved them. I thought they were so damn cool, dude. And that's when I started getting into it. I was just like, man, it was so cool. And it just kind of changed my life. I met so many great people. Just so many good friends along the way, so many legends. Started hanging out with Big Ed. Like, Big Ed is big in Albuquerque in the scene. He's a great tattooist, but he was also just like one of the toughest human beings I've ever seen in my life. Probably the only man I've ever met that I've been truly scared of, that I would not tangle with. So I'm one of those people. It's like,
Hmm.
let's fight, I'll fight. I don't care who you are, unless it's Big Ed. That was just a
Unless it's
step too
Skinhead.
far. He was special. He was special. Like, there's this one story in Albuquerque. So we used to party out behind the airport called the Dig. Is out in the middle of the Mesa. You remember this,
I
obviously.
remember the dig.
Yeah, and so we showed up. A bunch of skinheads and punk rockers showed up, and it was a bunch of jocks at the party, and they had a keg and stuff. So things just started getting tense. A fight started. Some jock hit Big Ed in the head with a 40-ounce old English bottle, and Ed just shook it off. Grabbed the dude, took the ball out of his hands, like, "You want to see what it feels like to be hit with a head with a bottle?" And smashed the ball over his head. And I was just like, "Holy shit!" Like, dude, it's just different. That's just different
Dude is
because people
just
don't
different.
walk away from taking one to the dome with a 40-ounce ball. It's just not. It did not compute. I mean, I was stunned. I was like, "Shit, did that just happen?" And there was a lot of things like that with Albuquerque. What was the funniest thing too is that with our scene, we could hang out with all the groups in Albuquerque. We even hung out
You
with
were
the
great
Cholos.
like that.
Yeah, we even hung out with the
Yeah.
Cholos or the Preps. We hung out with every group, but also at the same time, we'd also get in shit with a bunch of different groups too. I mean, I remember one night we were down in the valley and we were partying with some Cholos, and I think they're East San Jose, I believe, East San Jose, I believe. I can't remember which clique they were, but they were in a clique, and we went to the party, and everything was fine. But then all of a sudden, shit just got crazy, dude. And so we just started fighting. And it was me, but things just started going south, and we started fighting, dude. And we like fought our way out of the party, through the party. We hopped in, we had this souped up Chevelle. The car was sick. We're trying to get everybody in the car. In the meantime, I see, I think it's probably past. I don't think any criminality could happen now, but he ripped some dude's eyeball out and threw it at
Oh
him.
no.
Yeah, and threw it at him and jumped in the car. And he was like, "Dude, I shook that fucking dude's eye out." And I was like, "Yeah, I know, I saw." And then so we drove off, and we were like, "Where the fuck is Harvey? Where the fuck is Harvey?" But he had gotten rocked a couple of times, so he was just running down the street. We pulled up next to him, like, he get in the car, and he looked at us. I don't know what happened. He freaked out and started running. I think he thought we were still with the Cholos. We eventually found him and got him into the car, but it was like crazy, crazy night.
Yeah, and
And
there were a
and that
lot of nights like that.
Yeah, that was typical Albuquerque in the 80s and
It
early
was.
90s. It was nuts, man. It was literally the wild, wild west.
And I still can't put my finger on exactly why, if it was the time or the place or the people. Uh, did any of your friends sustain serious injuries?
No, not fight, but in other fights, I've had friends. Like a friend of mine, James Heine, one night, he was a skater kid and a skier and stuff. One night, they're at some party and some jocks they started shit with the skateboarders, and some jock hit him in the head with a golf club, almost killed him.
Wow.
And then I remember,
Wow.
yeah, and I remember my good friend James, one of the guys in the punk scene that I really looked up to. I remember he got shot in the Vickers parking lot across the street from UNM. He got shot in the butt, which we'll never let him live down. But he was fine. But he took one to the ass cheek. So and it was things like that. I mean, many times getting shot at in Albuquerque, going to parties and fighting. I remember, for a little while, I don't know why we did this. It was so stupid and so wrong. What we'd do is like we'd go to parties that we didn't really want to hang out with. We'd go in and steal their kegs and leave. And every once in a while people put up a fight, and I'd end up knocking somebody out because they're messing with one of my boys, and we'd leave and say, we took your keg anyway. Now you're not knocked out. Now you got a black eye and no keg. Well, you could have just given us the keg, and you'd have been fine. It wasn't cool, not even close.
No,
But
and I shouldn't be laughing. It's just this entire podcast is centered around young men doing crazy shit that they can now look back on and say, "What the hell was I thinking?"
yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
it was quite nuts. I mean, I remember one night, and actually I think it's like when everyone found out that I could really fight. We were at
Oh
some
gosh.
party, and that's what happened. We were with a bunch of skaters. With my buddy Carlos Montalvo, rest in peace. Another one of my good friends passed away. Um, love that guy to death. He's like a brother. And there was a few other of us there. We went to this party, and these frat dudes started hitting on. I mean, started picking on him and started fucking with him. And came and got me. He's like, dude, these dudes are fucking with me. And so I went up to him, I was like, what the fuck's your guys' problem? And they're like, fuck you. This one big jock was like, fuck you. I'm gonna fuck you up. I fucking knocked his ass out with one punch. And that was the end of that. And his son just sat there, looked at him, looked at me, and it's like, you can have the keg. I don't want any. We're good. We're good. We're good. And we took the keg and we left. But the thing is, so we took the keg and left. I remember who else was with us. Ace was with us and was with us. We ended up going back to I think it was Apartment, and got in a fight every time and
Each
got
other?
drunk together. Yes, they'd always get in a
Yeah,
fight with
they.
each other. They would
Yeah,
always fight each other. It was crazy. I don't know
yeah,
why. I mean, they were like best friends. They're like brothers.
yeah.
As soon as they got drunk, dude, you could count them fighting each other. It
Just
was it
start
was
swinging.
crazy. Yeah, yeah, it was
Yeah.
nuts, and it was a lot of. We fought so much back then in Albuquerque. I don't know if other towns were as violent as Albuquerque was, but it was crazy. Like, I often tell people like Albuquerque during that time was like a mix of kids had sex with suburbia, and the kid was placed in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I mean, it was crazy like that. I mean, I remember watching people watch that movie Kids and like how shocking it was and stuff like that. And I was like, I've
Yeah.
seen worse than that on a Tuesday night. I mean, unfortunately, it was true.
I relate it somewhat to The Outsiders, the
Yeah.
movie The Outsiders, and the book The Outsiders. It's actually nice to sit with you now and be able to look back and laugh at some of that stuff because at the time it didn't really seem funny.
Yeah, at the time, I didn't think it was funny at the time. For some reason, I thought it was just cool because we were tough. We were skinheads and punk rockers, and no one really in town fucked with us. I mean, everybody in town just knew that we had
Oh
some
yeah.
brawlers in our crew. I mean, we had Big Ed, we had Sabar, Carlos could fight, Amos could fight, I could
Oh,
fight. Carlos could fight, Dominic could fight. I mean, we all could throw down with the best of them. So it was like, people they just didn't really, they knew who we were. They just didn't really mess with us. They knew there was not a winning proposition for them.
they were scared when they saw you coming. It was never good news when your crew showed up at a party unless we
Yeah,
were friends.
yeah, yeah. And we didn't
Hmm.
always start shit. I mean, most of the time, I mean, well, that's not. Let me take it back. A lot of my friends did start shit. That's why a lot of the fights got in because my friends are just obnoxious and they're crazy and they just. But I think we'd mentioned this before. Most of us all came from broken homes. I can't think of any. Maybe Carlos Montalvo did. I can think maybe two or three of our friends that had both parents in the same house that I can remember. Most of us were
Uh,
single family. Either a parent passed away or one of the parents wasn't involved, and it was just
or a lot of the parents passed away tragically. I mean, we
yeah,
have friends whose parents died in the 70s in just horrible, horrible ways.
yeah,
And it's funny because the parents that we did have, my mom, she mentored a lot of young people. So like the good parents that were still around did their best to take care of all of the kids.
right, right,
Uh,
right. My
Mm-hmm.
dad was like that too. I mean, my dad was hard on me, and stuff. But you know what? One thing, my dad always fed everybody, and so my dad would barbecue a lot. So my friends would
Yeah,
come over, and he was always feeding
really.
them. That's a black Southern thing. You always feed your guests. You know what I'm saying? That was something that my dad just always did. And and my dad had taken in a couple of my friends because they were having trouble at home and stuff. Like one of my good friends, Dharma, he lived with me for almost a year because his mother was struggling at the time. And so my dad took him in and he stayed with us. And then he moved to Florida to live with his dad. And, I had many other friends come stay with us all the time. But that's one thing about my dad. I mean, he didn't really talk a lot, never really I only saw him cry once. I can't ever remember him saying he loved me. But he was a very, very Christian man, a very loving man. He just wasn't the way he was raised, just didn't do that. But he was always so good to my friends. And it's funny.
That's cool.
Out of all my friends, my dad absolutely adored Carlos Aguilar. He thought Carlos Aguilar was the coolest thing in the world. He'd always ask me, "Where's that boy Carlos at?" And I haven't seen
Oh,
him in
that's
a while. I was
funny.
like, "He's doing this thing, Dad. He's doing this thing." Him and my dad, when they got together and hang out, it was just so funny. Because Carlos was.
Yeah.
It made my dad laugh so hard. My dad just thought he was
Oh,
the
that's so
greatest
funny.
thing. Yeah.
Well, that's because he's kind of like you and me. He was cheerful and happy and fun to
Yeah.
be around.
Right.
Uh, I liked him. I loved him. Great guy.
Yeah. He is. He's back
Great
in
guy.
Albuquerque, actually.
Uh, what happened? Didn't your dad move away and leave you the house?
Yeah, so when I was in high school, I was like 17. So my dad finally remarried. He married my stepmom, who's a beautiful woman. I love her to death. She's great. I call her mom to this day. She's great. But she'd worked for the government. She was like a GS-12 or something like that. And so she worked in contracts, government contracts. So they had to move to Boston. So they moved to Lowell, Massachusetts, which is like right outside of Boston. Heard Lowell's not the greatest place in the world either. I've never been there, but I've been to
Mm-mm,
Boston.
I've heard
Well,
that too.
anyway, so they moved there, and so basically, and my brother Kenny, he had had a child with this woman named Nita, and my mom met Nita before she passed away and loved Nita, and would treat her like a daughter. My dad loved her too, and my brother wasn't really involved with his child or with Nita. He basically, one of those things. And so my dad took her in, and so she lived with us, even when my dad was there. But then when he moved to Boston, he let Lamar and Nita stay there, under the deal that she would watch over me, make sure I took care of business. But after about 5 or 6 months, she's like, "I'm out of here. I can't deal with Tommy," because I was partying all the time. My friends were always there, eating all the food, and so she moved out. And so for a few months, I had a house all to myself, and we just partied our asses off. I was in high school, all the bills were paid, because my dad was still paying the bills and stuff, and we just partied like crazy. And my dad came home unannounced and saw his house and said, "Well, I'm going to use your college fund to fix my house. What are you going to do? Because you can't stay here and you graduate high school." So, and sure enough, as soon
Uh,
as I graduated high school, my dad's like, "What are you going to do now? Because you can't stay here." And I was like, "I guess I'll join the military." And he allowed me to stay at home until I left to the military, left to the Navy. So, which was nice, which was kind, considering I just used his house as a
did you
party pad for months.
did you
Yeah.
just wreck the place? Like
I
it
mean, it
was
wasn't
dirty, or
totally
you?
destroyed. It wasn't totally destroyed. It was just like, it needed new carpet, new paint, chips in the
Oh,
wall, stuff like that. It wasn't filthy dirty. I mean, I'm not really a dirty person. It wasn't like immaculately clean, but it wasn't
no.
dirty either. It was just, you could tell it had been partied hard in, and it was crazy. It was nuts. I mean, sometimes on Saturday nights, we'd have like 200 to 300 kids in my house, and my house wasn't that big. Front and backyard's packed, inside the house is packed. You couldn't move through it. Every once in a while, we had to stop Amos from killing somebody. Oh my God, I remember one night. Oh, I can't. I just now thought about this. So one night we were having a party at my house, and it was a cool party. We had a couple kegs. It was grooving. Everything was cool. And all of a sudden, this white dude was like, "Pretty cool party. Too bad it's a niggers party." And then both heard him say that, like, "What the fuck?" And so the dude had a gun in his belt, and he lifted up his shirt like he was like gonna pull out his gun. Both put guns in his face, like, "We fucking dare you." And then the whole crowd just like ran out of the house, like complete panic. The dude sitting there shaking. I was like, "Just fucking let him go. Don't do anything to him in my house." And so they marched him out of the house with guns to his head, and the dude left. But it was crazy. It was nuts. I froze. I was just like, "Oh shit." I was thinking so many things. I mean, what is my dad going to think? A shootout in his house. I mean, it was crazy.
Somewhere along the way, guns and heroin became the next phase. It
Yeah,
was
it did.
it was like speed and probably acid in the 80s. Don't you have
Hmm.
a story about visiting someone's house and they were like,
Yeah. So this was in this my mother had already passed away. So I think I was around 17 at the time too. So I'm not going to mention the guy's name, but anyway, he kind of hung out in the scene. He was kind of a weirdo, but he kind of hung out in the scene. He was like at the time, if you know, he was kind of one of those dudes that's very much in the Joy Division at the time. And very much like the pre-stages of goth, very dark clothes, very dark demeanor. But anyway, he lived in the apartment right behind Vickers on Central, and I didn't know at the time, but he was apparently making meth in his bathtub. And so we were all over there hanging out, but we couldn't go to the back of the house. He wouldn't let anybody back there except for like a few exceptional people, whatever. I didn't care. I didn't really want to fucking go there, be in there anyway, because the dude was kind of weird. And the house smelled funny. Didn't know what the fucking smell was at the time, but the fucking house smelled funny. It smelled really chemically. I was like, whatever. Not a big deal. But then we were sitting there. All of a sudden, I just heard a voice, like my mother's voice. I could hear it clear as day. Leave. Get out of there. I was like,
Leave.
I just got up. I left about 15, 20 minutes later, dude. The cops raided that place, arrested a couple of my friends, arrested the guy who was making the meth, obviously, let a couple people go, but it was crazy. It was just nuts. And I was so grateful I wasn't there. I mean, especially being the only black dude in there. I was just like, this is not, it was crazy. And plus, I had gotten enough shit with the cops. It's like, it was me and Sabar, but Sabar, whatever, thought Sabar was a racist. He was a black skinhead, but he was a racist. You take that what you will. Um,
Okay.
and so it was basically just me. Well, there's one other one. It's Eric White. He's a good kid. He's a little bit underneath us, but I was pretty much the only black skinhead in town. So I still got a sore thumb. Remember even being in school, one of my black teachers came up to me. He wasn't a teacher of me, but he was a teacher at Albuquerque High. He came up to me. He's like, he literally looked at me and said, "Why do you hate yourself?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Well, you're a
Oh.
skinhead and they don't like black people." And I was like, "Yeah, you know what you're talking about." I gave him a brief history of it or whatever. He still just did not understand. None of my teachers understood me either. They're like, "What the hell's wrong with this kid?" Because the Geraldo Rivera thing had just come out, and it's like skinheads are bad, blah blah blah. It's just that whole thing. So,
Yeah, that was kind of odd. Uh, it- they corrupted that movement. I don't know how that happened, but
well,
shame
it's
on
just
them.
it's because racists always seek out insecure, weak, younger people
Okay.
to use as pawns,
Sure.
to use to
Okay.
get their way. You know what I'm saying? And I
Okay.
think, like Tom Metzger, he was huge in the Nazi movement in America. He corrupted a lot of young skinheads into the Nazi movement. And there was a bunch
Really?
of characters like that throughout history who just took what we had and warped it. And that's what haters always do. People who just hate everyone, they always steal and co-opt other people's things. This is what they do.
Okay.
So I mean,
Yeah, that makes sense. They're the vulnerable.
yeah, yeah, and I mean, I've spent a good percentage of my life fighting Nazis, bald-headed Nazis, because you know they're claiming something that they're not allowed to claim, as far as I could see it. You know what I'm saying? Because they're not allowed. They're just not. That's not
No,
their deal. If they
no,
want to be racist,
that
that's fine, but you can't claim our shit. You know?
good for you. Good for you. Any theories on Albuquerque? I mean, we have bikers, we had Mexican mafia, like
I
we lived our schools were right off Central Avenue.
Yeah.
Where was your house?
So my house, I lived in the UNM ghetto, basically. So I lived about 7 blocks away from UNM. I mean, we lived in a decent neighborhood. They call it the UNM ghetto because a lot of professors, students lived around that area. But it wasn't like a rich neighborhood, but it wasn't a poor neighborhood either. But I lived about 7 blocks away. Do you remember where the cemetery is on Yale Boulevard? On the
Really
back
quite well.
on the back side of the cemetery, that's my
Really?
house is like 6 houses up from
Okay.
the cemetery. That's why we spent a lot of time in the cemetery. I mean, oh my
Me
God.
too.
Please
Me
forgive me,
too.
God, for this. One night we used to hang out and party in the cemetery, as we did. Of course, we were
All the
crazy. So
time.
we get
It was
drunk in the cemetery
beautiful.
and
It
hang out.
was a
It
beautiful
was.
trees. It was historic. It's still to this day one of my favorite places.
Yeah, it was. It was well. But one night, I don't know why. I'm not going to mention the people's name, but they broke into one of the mausoleums and they opened up a
I remember
casket.
this. Oh
Yes,
my
and
gosh.
they took a ring off one of the corpses,
Wow.
and I think one of them kept a
I do
finger.
remember this.
And I was just like, what are you guys doing? I remember
I do
freaking
remember
out. I was
that.
like, what the hell are you guys doing, man? Just because, I was raised, in the church. My dad was like big in the church. My mom was big in the church. My grandfather was a preacher. I was like, dude, yo, it's bad enough we're partying here. What the hell are you guys doing, man? That was crazy.
Wow,
That
I
was,
remember that. I do remember
yeah.
that. That's pretty hardcore. There's another story about Halloween. Our group of friends was in the cemetery on Halloween, and the cops came, and they were really mad because Robert was dressed up like a cholo, and then
Yeah,
someone else had a Ku Klux Klan head like thing on their head, and you take that off. He takes it off, and it's Mike Howe. He's Indian.
right.
So we had fun with things back in the time, and we did at that cemetery, but that didn't go over very well. That police officer was incredibly confused.
Yeah, yeah. I remember several times getting chased out of the graveyard, and I remember like people who weren't really in our sit like, why the fuck do you guys hang out in a fucking graveyard?
It
And
was,
it's just
it was, yeah, it was beautiful. There's
because
so
no
many
one bothered
parks,
us
and
really. As long as
yeah,
the cops didn't see us, no one bothered us.
yeah. Well, it was a beautiful area. We hung out a lot at the Ridgecrest Parks or UNM parks, and that
Hmm.
was just another one.
Right.
It's the trees are all gone now.
Yeah,
I
it's
drove through
actually
that recently.
yeah. And there's buildings there. It's not even Yale Park anymore. There's only like a piece of Yale Park left.
Oh, isn't that crazy?
It
Were
is
you around
crazy.
for the Yale Park days? Like
Oh
what
God,
actual
yes.
Yale
I mean,
Park?
yeah,
Really?
yeah. Because I mean, I lived right down the street from it, so yeah, Yale Park was. Oh, you could get anything you wanted at Yale Park back in the day.
That was the center of all of it. And I blame a lot of that. I mean, think about how many drugs the United States government pushed into uh societies. That had to
Yeah.
be the distribution center for probably 3 or 4 states.
When I think about it, like, like you asked earlier what it was about Albuquerque, New Mexico, I think Albuquerque, for whatever reason, I think Albuquerque is a very spiritual place, but like it's a spiritual place that's like in conflict, for whatever reason. And I just think that, the old machismo Hispanic culture, you know what I'm saying? And then also, you have like, the scientific people from Kirtland Air Force Base in Sandia, you know what I'm saying? And just the Native American population, and then like this influx of black and white people, ex-military and stuff like that. I just think the culmination, it was just Albuquerque is just different, man. I don't. I wish I could explain to people what Albuquerque was like and is like, and why Albuquerque is so beautiful and amazing, but also so dangerous and a place I don't think I'd ever want to live again. I love it dearly, love to come visit, but there's just things there. It's just that once you get sucked into that whole Albuquerque vibe, it's like it hooks into you. You know what I'm saying? It's like it doesn't seem like you can leave or really survive. I mean, obviously, I know people who've made it in Albuquerque who still live in Albuquerque and are doing very well for themselves, but it was just I think for some of us, Albuquerque just was not a good lifetime plan to stay there. I mean, I'm forever grateful that Daria got me out of there. I mean, I love Albuquerque. We love to go visit. My favorite people are there, but I'm just so grateful that I got out. I mean, I don't think I'd have the career that I have. Definitely wouldn't be making as much money as I have that I do. And I'm peaceful up here. I'm saying there's no drama. I don't have to worry about my this friend fighting this friend at this party during the weekend or whatever. There's still some of that drama. I still get drama from Albuquerque once in a while. My friend will call me, this happened, this happened. I was like, yo, dude, I'm not involved in that, man. I don't want to know. That's between y'all. And it's just, and I'm so glad I'm away from that. My life is so much more peaceful. It really is. And also just being in Albuquerque, there's just, the whole vibe in Albuquerque is like you have to be prepared to fight. You have to
Yeah, that
constantly be ready. Because you'll get in a fight. I remember being in Albuquerque, having a gun pulled on me on the freeway. The guy cut me off, and I drove up next to him, and I just looked, and the dude points a gun at me, and I was like, "What the fuck?" And this is common in Albuquerque. In
it's
Albuquerque, it's like,
very
yeah, go on, finish.
no, that's you're exactly right. That's the norm.
Yeah, and it's just like always, like you always have to be on guard because there'll always be somebody like, "What you looking at? What's up, Holmes? What's up? You want some?" Always. And so it's just like,
Always.
you could be just going to the grocery store to get some bread and end up in a fucking fight over nothing, and it's just crazy.
I used to think it was poverty. I used to think it was ethnic diversity. I used to think it was drugs and alcohol, but I could never understand why even as a girl, like you would just stop to get gas and somebody was like, "What are you looking at?" And then somebody's starting to fight with you.
Yeah.
You think you think that's what it's like in Latin America? You think we're just south of the border and we never knew it?
I don't know. I don't think it's just necessarily a Hispanic culture thing. I think it's a New Mexico culture thing.
It really is.
Um, I mean, maybe I don't know, but it's not just the Hispanic people. It's everybody. The natives, the
It's
black people, the white people.
yeah,
Everybody wants to fight
yeah,
there. I don't know what it
yeah.
is. It's just, I mean, it'd be easy to say, it's like traditional, man-centered machismo Hispanic culture, but it's more than that. It's a
No,
lot of
that's not
things.
that.
It's a lot of
It's
things.
it's it's alcohol. A lot of people,
Yeah.
the alcohol tends to make you want to fight,
And
and
I
those
think
are
drugs too. I think drugs and I think poverty has something to do with it because, I mean, I think for a lot of people, I think their only way out and their only way to survive is to deal drugs. And if you're going to live in that world, you got to be ready to go at a moment's notice. You know what I'm saying? So you always have to be ready. As they say, you don't have to get ready if you stay ready. And
yeah,
that's kind of how it is in Albuquerque. And I think there's a lot of so much poverty in drugs. There's so many dealers around there and so many different little gangs, little different little sets, you know what I'm saying? So there's always conflict and just, you know,
it's I've spent the last 35 years studying sociology and criminology and history and all of humanities and economics because it was just such a strange place to grow up. I didn't I just didn't, I still can't figure out why it is like it is. And the only other place I know that's like it is Southern California.
yeah. Yeah, and that's funny you mentioned that because we have a lot of transplants from LA and a lot of
A
people
lot.
started calling Albuquerque Little LA because
I, I always
in a
thought,
ways it was like a little LA. It was
yeah,
like, it was just like very much Hispanic, but you had the black and the white and a lot of gang culture, a lot of drug culture, a lot of show me respect culture. I don't think you respect me, so I need to shoot kind of type of
yeah,
dumb shit. And I think also too, I think especially in the '80s too, because it was so big with the Bloods and the Crips. A lot of Bloods and Crips. Well,
right.
there was already a lot of Bloods in Albuquerque anyway, because Kirktown Pyrus, they were all Bloods. But then you started getting like these influx of Crips, and especially into the war zone, like the Crips were in the war zone. You had the Bloods in Kirktown, and just a little other Hispanic gangs around. And I think just you know, it's so many things. I mean, sometimes I want to blame the movies too. I mean, we shouldn't have been watching Scarface at 10 or 11 years old, because we thought that's how people acted. But it's so much. I think, honestly, I think there's like really, this is going to sound kooky. There's a spiritual aspect to Albuquerque, New Mexico. There's just something in the water there. There's just something different there.
I have theories about nuclear testing. If you look at my mom's generation,
Hmm.
there's a large number of my mom's generation that passed away from cancer.
Yeah.
And I've always thought, God, how bad is that? Not just for the environment, the ecosystem, but just the overall spiritual sense of the earth and the land, and it just can't be good.
Yeah, it can't be good.
And other
It's
things
fun.
too. I'm thinking about the Mexican and Indian wars,
Yeah.
the Indians that have
Mhm.
fought each other. There's been a lot of bloodshed in New
Yeah, yeah,
Mexico.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. And also, yeah, with nothing, yeah, there's a convergence of different tribes traditionally in New Mexico that fought a lot
Right
too. So yeah,
there.
there's that too. And it's funny how you said about the military and the testing. The reason my dad died of cancer, both my parents died of cancer, but my dad, he died of this really
Really?
weird form of lung cancer, and it was definitely he got it in the military. And he often said that because for during the '50s, I believe it was the '50s, he was in Pakistan building like secret remote bases in Pakistan, doing all kinds of shit there. And I think they were using like asbestos and all kinds of crazy chemicals there. And I think that's where he got it. I'm pretty sure. And
Wouldn't
he
surprise
believes that
me.
too. That's where he
Really?
got it from too. But it's just so funny that both my parents died of cancer. And they're always on military bases, always around a lot of shit. It's just don't. Who knows? Who knows?
Well, there's a lot of factors that go into all of that.
Yeah.
Any favorite punk rock? Hardcore, skate punk,
Oh,
like
music.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Tell me your
so
favorite music before we move too far ahead.
Bad Religion is like my all-time favorite punk
Yeah.
band. I love No Effects. I love Minor Threat, even though I hate Ian McKay. I met him in Wisconsin when I was in the military at a show, and I almost kicked his ass because he's a fucking asshole. He's just pretentious, fucking dickhead. We were at a
Okay.
public event. He walked up to me. He's like, "Don't smoke in front of me." And I was like, "Fuck you. Who the fuck are you?" He's like, "You don't smoke in front of me." I was like, "I'm gonna fuck you. I'm gonna whoop your ass." But the security jumped in. 'Cause you know how I was. I was just like, there
Yeah.
was a limit, and he was being very
Yeah.
disrespectful. And so I was like, "Fuck you." What other good bands I love? I love No Effects, even though a lot of their issues, some of their band members are do some shit that's not quite kosher. Um, just I love old Circle Jerks. Old Exploited. I love the Specials. I love Sign Rep, which is like it's a ska band. Well, not really ska.
Okay.
It's like dance hall kind of. Just stuff like that. I listen to all kinds of genres of music though, but I mean, I love heavy metal too. Like, love Metallica. Absolutely adore Metallica to this day. Probably my favorite all-time band, not genre standing, is Led Zeppelin. I've
Okay.
always loved Led Zeppelin. They just
Okay.
spoke to me, because it's so bluesy. I grew up around the blues, and
Yeah.
my dad is very much in the blues, and so Led Zeppelin kind of spoke to me in a different way, because of that.
Okay. I would agree with that. Beautiful music.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Beautiful music. So then did you finish school? Did you finish high school?
Yeah, I finished high school. I finished high school in Albuquerque. Actually, I ended up finishing at Freedom. I left Albuquerque High and finished at Freedom just because, I was rebellious. And so I finished up at Freedom, went to the military, got out of the military, started working, fixing copiers for a while. Then I worked at the CBS affiliate in Albuquerque as a broadcast engineer for a while. Did that for a few years. And then life got kind of crazy for me. Um, Series of deaths and stuff like that that kind of had me spinning out of control. One of my best friends and my grandmother died the same day, and then
Oh my.
a month later, my dad passed away. And so I just kind of
Really?
I spun out for a while. Was having issues, with drugs, not heroin or meth and stuff like that. It was mostly just alcohol and doing coke and stuff like that, just to numb the pain. And then I finally got my shit together. Well, as I like to say, God placed people in my life who helped me get my shit together because you don't do anything in this world alone. I don't care what anybody says. We all need help from time to time. Um, and I think the world's better when we look out for each other and take care of one another. And I think that's the problem with us today is that we're too selfish. We're always looking out for our own goods and our own needs instead of looking out for the needs of others. And if we looked out for other people's needs, it'd help us all. As they say, rising water lifts all boats. Um, so yeah, so I got clean, I got my shit together, went back to school, majored in biology. At the time, I started dating this woman who was a physician, um, and we dated for a few years. Learned a lot. It was not a good relationship because I wanted to be there, but she didn't want to be there. I felt like I was being used to help raise her kid because the kid's dad was not really in the picture and he was younger. So I took up that mantle for a few years and then when we stopped seeing each other, I just had to cut off all contacts. And I cut off contact with the kid as well. And I feel really bad about that because I really love the kid and I wonder how he's doing. But it was something I would do for my own mental health. I couldn't be involved with this mother anymore. She was just the way she treated me and the things that went down just was not good for me, and I didn't want to be involved with her, so I had to cut him off. But then it was a good thing. It's a good thing because out of that, my wife now we had stayed connected for all these years, and we always talked and stuff, and just I'd always had to think for Daria, always. As a matter of fact, when we were in high school, she'd always come over to my house after she was done working, and I would rub her feet and stuff. And we made a pact that if we weren't married by the time we were 40, we'd marry each other. Because at the time I had a thing for her, but she wasn't having it because I had wandering penis syndrome, so she wasn't having any of that. So, um, so we started talking and stuff, and then, and I told her how I always felt about her. I finally just, broke down and told her how I felt about her, that I've always had a thing for her. And so started visiting Portland, and then we hooked up, and then we started seeing each other. I was flying to Portland a lot. Her parents helped me out with that, which is great. They made sure that we got to see each other a lot during that year period about. And then well, finally I was going to move to Portland, and I told her, I was like, look, I don't want to move to Portland and live with you unless you're going to marry me. And she's like, well, I don't know if we need to do that. No, 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 no. But then she thought about it. It's like, fuck it, let's do it. So we got married in Albuquerque.
That's awesome.
Yeah, moved to Portland.
And
Packed,
all of social media rejoiced. Like, we
yeah.
just thought that was the coolest thing ever. It was like a fairy tale. We
It
all
was
got to
kind of.
take part.
The funny thing is that Daria, she remembers now, but at the time she didn't remember. It's like after we got married, I was like, we were both 39. We got married. I was like, we beat our pact. She's like, what? And I was like, don't you remember we made that pact? And if we were not married by the time we were 40 married. She's like, oh my God, I do remember that. And we got married at 39.
That's
So
great.
yeah, it was
What year?
crazy. And
What year was that?
oh my God, what year did we get married? Holy crap! Why am I not thinking? It was
I
May
feel like
8th,
2000.
May 8th, 2010. 2010.
Okay,
May 8th,
2010.
2010. Yes.
Wow.
And then a year later, we had our precious JJ. He's the light of our lives. You know, I spoil the shit out of him, much to Daria's chagrin, but he's my boy.
You're
You know what
that
I'm
guy.
saying?
You're that parent. Okay, no, that's
Well,
great.
my dad was a
No,
hard ass. My dad was a hard ass. He's in the military for 27 years. I remember waking up 5:30 in the morning, having to make my bed and do shit like that. And, and like he wasn't a rich man, but he wasn't poor either. And it's like, a lot of my friends had money, and I never really had shit. I mean, he gave me the basics, obviously. I had a roof, clothes, food, all that stuff. Sent me to private schools, which was not cheap. Um, Worked his ass off to do that. But, I never really got all the little trinkets and stuff that our other friends did. And so I make sure my son has fucking everything. And it's just, I
Good for
work my
you.
ass off and it's for him. I mean, I only work for him and Dari anyway. I'm not doing all of this for me. I've lived with nothing before. That's not a big deal for me, you know what I'm saying? But I want my son not to live like that. I want him to feel like he is privileged, especially because he's half black and half Jewish. I want him to know that he's privileged. He's just as special as anybody else and he can have anything anybody else wants.
What
So,
a good dad. I knew this would be a great time to start interviewing my friends because most of us are parents by now and we've owned up to the things that we've done. We can really reflect
yeah.
back with a little bit of experience and wisdom. And was your dad being strict on you? That didn't contain you in your teenage years?
Well, he was strict in a manner of speaking that I had to do certain things, cleaning up, you know what I mean? Make sure I was always presentable, make sure that I always talked like I had a brain in my fucking head. There was
Okay.
no coming
Okay.
home
No,
talking like I was like, with the black vernacular. That did not fly with
no
my dad. That was
gangster.
not going to happen. But,
No.
but at the same time, he didn't know how to raise a son. And I was going out, and it's like, I was born in the 70s in New Mexico. He was born in Georgia in the 20s. I mean, this huge cultural divide. The world had changed, and it's like he didn't know what to do. And I was pretty much out of control. And plus, by the time I was like 15 years old, I was bigger than he was. My dad was only like 5'6", 5'7". My mom was like 5'11". So it's like, I remember one time coming home, my dad had been at the bar drinking. So he was at home waiting for me, and I'd been drinking. And my dad was a good guy. He wasn't abusive at all, but sometimes he'd get a little, you know, a
Yeah.
little, a little asshole-ish when he was drunk. And so he
Okay.
started talking
Okay.
shit to me, and he tried to hit me. And I remember grabbing his hand, grabbing his fist, put it down. I picked him up, sat him on the couch, and said, "Don't ever put your fucking hands on me again." And that was the last time me and my dad had a real conflict like that because I felt awful. I still feel awful about doing that. I shouldn't have done that to my dad, disrespect him. But, he was drunk and I felt threatened. And, growing up in Albuquerque, what do we do when we feel threatened? We handle our business. Yeah, exactly. So, but I felt bad about that. I can't imagine what he must have felt either, because I can't imagine what I'd feel if my son humbled me like that either. I mean, I feel that still to this day it fucking tortures me. I feel awful about it, but
Really.
I just didn't want to get hit. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I grew up in a black culture. You got whoopings. It's just part of the way of life went. I mean, I don't think it's abusive. I'm not one of those people who believe in corporal punishment. Totally don't believe in it. But I understand why some people think about it or do it, because I grew up in a corporal punishment household. As a matter of fact, the Lutheran school I went to, we got swatted there. They were allowed to swat us there. So yeah, it was old school
Really.
religious school. So yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I still feel awful about that. I can't imagine, how humiliated my dad must have felt. That wasn't cool at all. But I felt like I needed to defend myself.
What year did your dad die?
He died the same year Josh and my grandmother died, and I believe it was it was 1990. Actually, what year did Princess Diana die? It was the year Princess Diana.
97.
Yeah, that's
97.
yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I
he died in
remember we were
'98.
talking
He
about
died.
that.
Yeah, he died in '98, right
Really?
after because my stepmom had flown my dad's brothers and sisters in to see him in a surprise. The only time I ever seen my dad cry, I was shocked looking at him cry, which made me cry in turn
Oh,
because I was like, oh
wow.
my god, he's the toughest man I've ever seen in my entire life, and he's fucking crying. I was like, oh, it's pretty heavy. So yeah, that happened. So yeah, so he died. He died in '98. He died in yeah, because Josh and my grandmother died in February. My dad died. Actually, he died 5 days after my. I didn't think about it. He died like 5 days after my 26th birthday. Mom died a week for my 13th
Really?
birthday. My dad died about a month after my 26th. So 13 years is kind of a weird number for me. So,
Yeah, I lost a step parent when I was 13. I should tell you this story sometime because uh it was just a lot of the same. It was the parent that was keeping me on track and in line, and then bam, 13 years old, 8th grade. That's
mhm.
not the good time to lose one of the supervisors in the
Yeah,
household.
especially my mom because she's the one who kept us on track. She's the one who got me
Yeah.
into sports. My mom was a little bit opposite in my family. My dad, he boxed in the military, so he liked boxing, and he played fast pitch softball, which he was really good at actually. But he wasn't like a huge sports, but my mom was huge in the sports. So growing up, I played baseball, ran track, played basketball, played football, and I was an exceptional. I mean, I'm not just patting myself on the back. Really, really, really good baseball player. And I probably could have made the major leagues, but I remember my mom was my biggest fan. She loved it, loved watching me perform. Could always hear her yelling from from the stands and stuff like that. And she'd always like, "Hit a home run, Tommy! I'll buy you McDonald's, or whatever, stuff like that." And so I got used to her being there. And I remember after she died, I was still playing baseball. I only played 1 year baseball after she passed away. And I remember it was like the bottom of the eighth. We needed a run. We were down. And I was such a good hitter. I mean, I could hit anybody. I was so good. And I remember going to the batter's box, and I was digging in, getting ready. And I stepped out of the batter's box, and like I always did, I always looked in the stands to see my mom. And that was my first reaction. I mean, I knew she was dead, but it was just something I did. And I
Went
looked,
looking for her.
and she wasn't there. And I remember striking out, and I finished playing the rest of the year, and I just stopped playing baseball after that. It just didn't seem fun anymore. And like that moment when I looked in the stands and she wasn't there, I think that's honestly when it really, truly, truly, truly hit me that she was gone forever, that she was never going to be. I mean, I knew, of course, obviously. I mean, I saw her dead. I saw
Yeah,
the paramedics, trying to revive her. Well, fake reviving her because she was already passed
yeah.
away. But they have to put the defibrillator pads on her anyway, protocol. And so, I mean, I knew, but that's when it like really, 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 really sunk in. I think also at around the same time is when I really started like getting into the counterculture and seeking other misfits like myself. You know.
My stepdad, he was older than my mom, and he'd already raised 5 kids in Albuquerque. They were grown. And I remember the man was determined not to let me go down that path. I never knew what he meant. I never knew why that man was so intent upon giving me a good upbringing.
Hmm.
Until 20 years later, when I realized, or 5 years later, when I realized all the shit that he was trying to keep me out of.
Right.
Because
Yeah,
he'd
he's being
seen
a
it
good dad.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'd already raised 5 kids in Albuquerque, so he knew where it had the potential to
Right.
go.
Right.
Yeah, my life would have been much different if that man was still around.
Yeah, and see, that's funny too. Now that I think about it too, I think that was like my issue with my dad and how he just let me run wild because he was in the military for so long. I don't think he understood what it was like in the streets, and he missed most of the 60s being overseas,
Yeah,
fighting in different wars
yeah,
and stuff. So it's like, I don't think for 27 years, I don't think he got to see how America was changing, how America was. And
yeah,
then all of a sudden, it's like, he finally gets out of the military in the 70s, but then he's working full time, going to school to get degrees and stuff, I think to feel like he made himself in something because, his family came from a bunch of educators and he kind of messed up when he got a woman pregnant and joined the military. So I think he was making up for lost time. So I don't think he ever really got the feel of what Albuquerque was like on the streets. You know what I'm saying?
I think that's true for a lot of the single parents that raised us. I don't think they were bad parents. A lot of them were very attentive. I just don't think they had any idea what we were being presented with
Right.
in Albuquerque, in a high school right off Central Avenue,
Right.
right near UNM,
Yeah.
right near all the like travel lodges. And
Hmm. Yeah, but all
yeah,
the
I don't think
seedy
they had
motels. What was that other one? That big one. It was like it was right off of like it was by Highland. Remember that big one by like the sands, the desert sands. Oh my God, that place.
all of
Whoo.
those.
Yeah,
All of those.
yeah.
Kind of
Especially the desert
crazy.
sands because it was right there by Highland too, and there was so much drug activity out of that place too.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I used to work at some of those diners on
Yeah.
Central. Good and bad. I was well protected, so it was easy for
Right.
me, but I saw a lot of crazy shit.
Yeah.
Uh,
Definitely.
for sure. So, what happened? Like, you came back from the Navy in the early 90s?
Yeah, I was back from the Navy in about 93, 94. I can't remember. I think it might have been
Okay.
94, 93, somewhere around there.
Things were bad in the 90s in Albuquerque. We lost a lot of friends,
Yes, we
some
did.
tragically. I mean, a lot of overdoses, a lot of heroin, a lot of guns.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it changed when I came back. I saw a lot of my friends were going down a dark road, I mean, a lot of my friends are doing things they shouldn't be doing. One of my really good friends I had mentioned earlier, he died of a heroin overdose in a hotel. Good friend of ours too. he died because of that illness as well. You know, one success story, Big Ed was all caught up in that stuff, but at the end of his life, he was clean, he was doing his things, and he reconnected with his native roots and was living on his family's land, and so proud of him. And it just hurt so much that he passed away. But at least he got clean. But there were so many people. I mean, it was just like everybody was like, well, not everybody, but so many people were shooting up heroin and shooting up crystal meth, and that shit scared me. I was just like, dude, it was
Yeah,
just
no
weird.
thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't want any part of that. A lot of smoking crack. Like, you came
yeah,
home and a lot of people had. I mean, in the 80s, it was a party.
right.
In the 90s, it went dark.
Yeah, I mean, in the '90s, it became like a lifestyle. I mean, that's what the people were doing. Is that their whole life revolved
Yeah,
around either doing dope or selling dope or acquiring dope. You know?
yeah. Well, and I guess then if you think about it, in the 2000s, it hit the rest of America. Maybe we were just ahead of our time.
Yeah, yeah. So they smuggle a lot of dope through New Mexico too. So
They
the Mexican
do.
mafia. I remember working when I worked at the Office of Medical Investigators in Albuquerque. We get so many like Mexican mafia cases. People, dead in the Mesa, because drug deals gone bad and shit like that. It's just crazy.
Well, wasn't that the thing that you always knew if you screwed up in Albuquerque, somebody was going to take you out to the West Mesa, bury you neck deep in the desert, and leave you there?
Or put you in a 50-gallon barrel and leave you there, which that happened a lot too, which is craziness.
Well, I didn't know this. I was just recently finding out that there's 12, they found 12 women buried in the West Mesa murders. I didn't even know that. That was like a 2000 thing.
Yeah, I worked at the Office of the Medical Investigator when that
Did you
happened. Actually,
really?
yeah, I was still in school at the time, but I worked there. We uh, we we had the task of sorting through all that stuff or whatever. I never went out to the field.
Wow.
My boss now
Yeah.
actually was out in the field and did that, and
Wow.
it was actually 11 people, but one of the girls was
11?
pregnant. That's why it was 12. One of the
Wow.
girls was pregnant. And
I
funny
didn't
is,
even.
one of the girls that they
Yeah.
killed, I knew who she was from my
Really?
bad times. Yeah, when I was going through my shit,
Really?
I knew who she was. Yeah, I knew her name was Cinnamon on the street. I knew who she was. It was just kind of. I didn't ever told anybody at the time because I was working investigator that I knew who she
Sure.
was. I just,
Sure.
did what I had to do and just kept moving. But it was just like, yeah, it was that kind of hit close to home too, and it just made me realize I was so glad that I got away from that lifestyle, got away from that stuff.
Wow.
It was just, yeah,
Well, I thought so many things were bad in the 90s. I didn't even realize how much worse they got.
yeah,
And that's true all over New Mexico.
yeah. From what I'm hearing, it's worse than it was now. It's worse than it was then, which is kind of hard to believe because of fentanyl. But I do get it. So I work in Portland. It's like Groundhog's Day. I can't tell you. I
Really?
probably I have at least one fentanyl overdose a day, just about.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, sometimes two or
That's
three. So
tough.
yeah. So
That's
what
tough.
I do
Yeah,
so
tell us that.
I I work at Multnomah County, but I work for underneath the doctor's offices. The doctor isn't present, so like basically anybody who overdoses or it's a suicide, or if it's like no medical conditions, they come to me and I just do an external exam. I draw fluids, make sure to look for outward signs of trauma, things like that. Make sure that we didn't miss anything. Take fluids, photos, do a really thorough examination, outward examination, and write a report and send it to the doctor, and then the doctor will sign the DC. So I see a lot of that's pretty much what I do. Is I do exams and ODs and suicides all day, like gunshot wounds to the head and stuff like that. So that's my
Doesn't
daily.
phase you either, does it? You feel
Grew up
like
in
you're.
Albuquerque, man. Nothing phases you. You make it out of Albuquerque, nothing's gonna fuck with you. You're built for whatever after you leave Albuquerque. That's one thing I can say about Albuquerque. You can make it out of Albuquerque. You can make it anywhere. You really
Oh,
can.
okay then. Okay then. At least it's not just my imagination, because I often think, man, that place was crazy.
It was crazy.
Hmm.
It was
It
crazy. And I
was
think we're all a little
crazy.
bit crazy. I mean, I think part of the reason why I do, I think because my parents died so young, hanging out in cemeteries all my life, and just the nuttiness we did, I think I just gravitated towards the dead, you know? Something just, I don't know, it spoke to me and it just doesn't affect me. So I can deal, I'm allowed to deal. Well, I shouldn't say it doesn't affect me. I have to take breaks every once in a while. I have to take days off
Okay.
sometimes because it's just, you can't see a horror show every day, no matter who you are,
Sure.
and not let it
Sure.
affect you. You have to take a break every once in a
Sure.
while. So,
Sure. Well, you consider it what do you call yourself? A last responder?
Yeah, we call ourselves last responders. Yeah, when the last ones show up, and no one's ever happy to see us. So it is what it
But
is.
you're doing a duty for your
I
community. You're
am
doing something not everybody could do.
right, and that's why I like doing it. I feel like it's my way of giving back to the community because I believe, you know, I've been given so much by a variety of different people and stuff like that. It's just a way for me to give back because like you said, not everyone can do it. Not everyone wants to do it. A lot of people who want to do it, when they get really to the nuts and bolts on it, they decide they really don't want to do it
Yeah, maybe
because
not so
I mean it's
much.
not fun. I mean, people think it'd be like interesting. I mean, it's interesting in ways, but it's also not fun. It's a job just like anything else, but it's also you're dealing with tragedy because you have to deal with these people's families, and it's rough talking to these families sometimes. It's pretty, and sometimes it can be frustrating because people watch too much television. They think everything is
I
like
mean,
it is on fucking TV, and it just drives me
no,
crazy. It drives me
no.
crazy, but it is what it is. But I love my job. I'm glad I'm doing it. So,
How are things in Portland? Were you guys in the city? I know you're in suburbia now, but
um, it,
lots of drugs, lots of death.
it's getting better in Portland. It's not like it was when I moved here. So it hasn't fully recovered. It is getting better, but the homeless population is just so crazy here. I mean, and I think a lot of other states they send their homeless here on purpose because their services. We provide a lot of services for the homeless, which is
Yeah.
which is a good thing. I think we need to help and look out for people, but also at the same time, I think some people use it as a crutch and it's wasteful. They use it as an excuse to stay on the streets and do dope all day. Especially by my office, it's like there's always like people nodding out in front of my office or smoking fentanyl right next to our parking lot, and it's just. And we have like the city has got Portland's gotten to the point where they're trying to clean up all the homeless camps. So they contracted with this company that goes and cleans the homeless camps. It's like they'll clean the homeless camp. 2 weeks later, they're back there again. Then 2 weeks later, they'll come back and clean it up again, and it's just like Groundhog's Day. And it's sad. I mean, it's really sad. I believe we really need to help these people. I just think we're going about it the wrong way. And honestly, I think what we need to do, and I hate to say this because everyone has their civil liberties, but I believe these people that are dangerous to themselves. I think they need to be locked up for a year in a rehab, in a hardcore rehab for a year, and then a year after that, they have to spend a whole year in a group home in a halfway house. Because you got to give these people time to sober up, truly sober up. A couple weeks or a couple months is not going to help them. They're still fucking, their brain's still fried at that point. But
Well,
but
thank
at the
you
same,
for saying that too, because I have the same, like everyone deserves their freedom and to do what they want. But
right.
if I had a family member on the street, I would pick them up, lock them in a room, chain them to a radiator, call the police, put them in jail. Like, you can't let people live like that.
You,
They
you,
deserve
you
better.
Yeah, you can't. It's just it's impossible because it's like they are hurting and killing themselves, but they're so high and so locked up in it they don't realize it. And they need time away from the drugs, and they need therapy at the time, and they need food and they need exercise. They need a good atmosphere to grow, to let their brain heal, and that takes at least a year or two. And that's why I think they should be inpatient for a year, then another year of like a halfway house where they live there, they're still monitored, but they can go out and work and come back and stuff like that and still have ongoing counseling. I think after 2 or 3 years of all that, that'll give them a better chance to get themselves working and get themselves in a better place. You can't just take someone off the streets for a couple of weeks and say, "Oh, here, detox," and then now you're back on the
No,
street and homeless again. They're going to start doing dope
no,
right again. It
no.
doesn't. I wish I knew the answer. It saddens me every day because I have to walk by it
Every
every
day,
day. And then
every
every
day.
day it's like literally I walk by people sometimes downtown. It's like, well, I'll be seeing you in a couple days. Probably seeing you
Wow,
today. I mean,
wow.
it is
That's
what
a
it is. I
lot to
mean, I
think
see
about.
you could tell. I mean, some of these people they're just so profoundly sick, and it's not. I mean, it's because they haven't been taking care of themselves. I mean, it's not just the drugs that are
Yeah.
killing them. They have
Oh,
abscesses, they have wounds, they have MRSA. They have staph infections. They have. I mean, the things I see on people. I mean, I've seen things on people that are just so disgusting. Like how can someone walk around like that? I had this one guy. He had a wound was so bad on his leg you could almost see his bones. He was walking around the streets like that for weeks, if not months. And I'm just like, how do you do that? I mean, it's sad. It's like you see them. It's like they aren't here for much longer. You know what I'm saying? Like, or like a lot too. You see like a lot of women whose backs are permanently curved for them nodding out or looking for dope.
oh,
And it's like they've gotten to the point
oh.
where They can't
Oh,
walk around straight anymore. They walk around like this, bent over like a humpback, and they have to look like this because their bones, their spinal cord is just fried, and it's just basically locked in that position. It's incredible.
wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
What a horrible drug. I mean,
Yeah.
you and I have seen a lot of horrible drugs in our life, but I just didn't think it could keep getting worse.
Oh, dude, fentanyl is a whole nother level. That's a different beast, dude. Fentanyl is like, I very rarely see heroin overdoses anymore. Because why are you going to shoot
Really?
up heroin when you can just smoke fentanyl and you're going to get higher and you don't need a needle? I mean,
Is that what it is?
yeah.
How many of those people dying from fentanyl are just innocent bystanders or people that try to take
Oh,
something else?
we definitely get people who think they're doing coke, spend the night partying, want to go get a little bit bag of coke, and there's fentanyl in it. I mean, I tell everyone I can meet, all my friends back home, and tell anybody, it's like, I don't know what you're into anymore. I was like, don't buy shit from anybody because fentanyl's in everything. I mean, it's in the coke,
Everything.
it's in the fucking
Yeah.
meth. I mean, it's even been in fucking weed too, which is crazy. I don't,
Wow.
yeah, it's just crazy. So it's like, I mean, I tell people if they smoke pot, go to a pharmacy. Do not buy anything off the street, period. Not pills, because they even like have pills that are actually fentanyl, but they're stamped as something else.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
like
I
they'll
say
have
the
it
same
stamped
thing.
as Xanax. Yeah,
Don't put anything in your mouth. Don't put
no,
anything in your mouth.
no, absolutely
No.
not. Absolutely not.
Hmm.
It's nuts. I mean, I've never seen it. There's never been a drug like fentanyl before. It's a
If
different beast.
if Portland and Oregon has the resources, are the people accessing them? Are they using them?
Well, they are and they aren't. I mean, there's some good programs. I just don't know if they're run as good as they should be. And also, I think a lot of the people in these programs, they know how to game the system. And it's not necessarily the system's necessarily broken. It's these people know how to game the system, and that's why it's like there's a lot of people in Portland who do such good work, and they're working really hard to solve this problem. They really, really, truly, truly care, and they're doing the best they can. And I see it, and I applaud them for it, and I'm all for it. But the problem is that they aren't allowed to be away from it enough, and that's why I've come to the conclusion because I'm a very, very progressive, liberal person, but I'm very, very, very much so about people's freedom to be able to do what the hell they want. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And for me to
Yeah.
say that you should take someone's civil liberties away and lock them up is a
Yeah.
huge step for me. But I don't see any other answer. There is no other
I
answer
don't
because
either.
they're going to continue
No.
to game the system. If they're not far away from the drugs, their brains aren't going to heal. They're still going to game the
Yep.
system. They're going to be back on the streets, and they're just wasting money that way. And
Yep.
I mean, obviously, I don't even think it's legal, but I think there should be some sort
I
of
know.
precedent where, like, you're hurting yourself, you're a harm to
Yes.
yourself, so we're going to put you away. You
Yeah.
know, and at the time, to be quite
And
honest
I
with
struggle with that. That's against
you, yeah,
everything that I believe in. But
yeah,
as a person who understands drugs and addiction, I don't see what other choice
yeah,
you would
yeah,
have but to save those people. It's like chemical warfare.
yeah. There is no other
Mm.
choice. You know what I'm saying? And also,
No,
it's
there's
affecting other people who aren't on drugs,
sure.
their peace of mind because there's like homeless camps in front of people's houses, broke down RVs in front of people's houses. I've had a couple incidents where, these homeless people started attacking people who lived in their houses. You know what I'm saying? It's like, we want to help you, we care about you, but you know what? When you move into somebody's neighborhood and then their kids suddenly can't go outside because there might be
That's
drugs, or God knows if you're, there's a lot of sexual predators on the street too. God knows.
oh
So
my
it's like
gosh.
basically you bought a house, you have a yard for your kid, but now you can't even let your kid out because some homeless person won't get their shit together. And so they fucked your whole life up too. So you're dealing with their addiction too, even though you don't have an addiction. And that's not fair. And I hate to say that, but it's not fair. It's not fair to
It's
these people.
no, and I don't know what else to do other than lock them in a room.
Yeah.
I'd want someone to lock me in a room. I guess I wouldn't want anybody to live like that. I appreciate your compassion and your passion. Didn't you also tell me recently? We all know, anyone who knows you knows that you are very politically opinionated,
Very much so.
which I totally respect. I respect anyone who has an opinion, a well-researched opinion on anything. But don't you all just come by it naturally? You have a first cousin who was a Black Panther. You
Yeah.
were raised in a family of educators, civil servants. I even read a quote recently about what was it? Being black is like being punk rock all the time.
Yeah, basically, yeah. I think being political, it's in my blood. Like I said, one of my first cousins was in the Black Panther. He was in prison for a long time for supposedly killing a cop. I don't know if he did. I don't, you know, my dad seemed to think he did. Other people in my family seem to think he didn't, whatever. But he finally got out of jail. His name was Anthony Bottom, but he changed his name to Jalil Montanique. I cannot pronounce his last name, but anyway, he's a Muslim now. But yeah, a lot of my dad's side of the family, they're all from the Bay Area. So they were heavily into the Black Panthers, heavily into like Black education and Black empowerment and helping Black folks. And just, so it's kind of, it's just instilled in me just as young, to fight for your rights. Because I mean, America is wonderful. America, I believe, is the best place on earth, but we have a lot of systemic problems, big time,
Sure.
and
Sure.
we haven't dealt with a lot of them. And we need to, and our current climate is going to lead to a crash. I mean, something's going to happen, and I just don't. And I think we've discussed this before. I don't want to go too long because I actually have to jet here pretty soon. I have football today with my
Okay.
son, but it
Okay.
it's just that you know I think one of the biggest problems in America has always been, I mean, I think there's two big problems. We have this mythology that we're the lone cowboy, we can do it all ourselves and pick each other up by our bootstraps. I don't think that works in the world. I think we all need help. I think we all have bad times. I think we all need support. And I think this backs up because, look at all these corporations who get money from the government to exist. So obviously they need help. The common person probably needs help too. Just saying. And also, we've never dealt with our legacy of racism, and we're never going to progress as a country. We're never going to live up to our dream, live up to America's ideology, to be the America that we've always wanted to be. That's never been, but live up to the dream of we're all treated equal, and this is the greatest land on earth. We've never achieved it, and a lot of that's because we've never dealt with the lasting legacy of slavery and racism in this country, which haven't. I mean, like I'm sure you've seen the graph. There's a graph of like how long. It's like a graph. How long were Black people in slavery? Huge chunk of the pie.
Oh,
How many
yeah.
people? Well, how long were people in Jim Crow? Another big beast. And there's a small slither starting from like the late '60s till now, where there was actually sort of freedom for Black Americans. And it's like people don't understand. They all like to say, "Get over it. There's no racism in America." That's horseshit. There's still racism in America because you know what? Some of y'all's grandmothers, some of y'all's parents were spitting
Yeah.
on kids down south and didn't want them to be in their schools, and they're taking Black history out of schools because they say it's divisive. Because you know what it is? They don't want their kids to know how fucked up their ancestors were. They don't want their kids to see how white people subjugated Black people, even Irish people to a certain point, and Native Americans, even Japanese. All the dirty
People are
shit
mean
they,
to each other.
yeah, they've done
People
to it.
do mean shit to each other.
Right. And they think, and I think a lot of them think, well, if we ignore it and act like it never happened, then
Oh.
out of nowhere, racism will be solved. No, you need to deal with the bullshit. We really, really need to because it is still there. It is still there. I mean, we have a president who has people on his administration who go to white supremacist parties, who speak about white supremacy, who speak about the great replacement theory. You know what I'm saying? We had a man during Charlottesville who said there was good people on both sides. No, there's no good people with fucking Nazi, fucking fascist Nazi motherfuckers. Those aren't good people. I mean, that's ridiculous. One of the most ridiculous statements I've ever heard in my entire life from a president. Good people on both sides. Get the fuck out of here. We literally fought World War II fighting against those people. Literally fought a world war fighting against us. Did y'all forget? I mean,
I'm
I don't
proud of
understand
your
it.
passion, man. No, I'm proud of your passion. You and I should have more conversations like this. We can make you your own podcast channel because
We could talk
I
about
just
that.
yeah, I just appreciate anyone who has a viewpoint that's educated.
Yeah,
Whether I agree with everybody about everything. I mean, I'm a chameleon, but
right.
I really appreciate passion. So
Thank you.
you
Thank you.
just keep doing what you're doing, man. You have a great day with your son,
I
and
will. I
we'll
will.
be in
Thank you, Deanna.
touch. Big hug
I'll
to
let
Daria.
I will. I'll let her know
Yeah.
that. Just send her a text here in a bit when you're ready for her. She just got
Okay.
back from Pilates. I think she's eating, so she's probably gonna want to rest for like 20 minutes or so. So give her a little bit of
Yeah.
time.
I think she's decided to let you be the storyteller in the
Oh, okay.
family, which is
Okay.
okay. Which
All
is
right.
okay. But take care, man. Love you. Good to see
Love
you.
you too, girl.
Bye.
Good to see you. Thank you for
Take
doing
care,
this.
man.
Bye.
Bye.